Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne Leon. This is a fully independent podcast. Now more than ever, independent media needs the support of listeners and viewers. Go to aroundtheempire.com. You can find out how to support the podcast, gain access to bonus content, and all the different platforms that we're on. Our guest today is Jeffrey Carr, and we talk about his experience working with the Ukraine Ministry of Defense cyber warfare team when the invasion unexpectedly began. Jeffrey Carr has been an internationally known cybersecurity advisor, author, and researcher since 2006. He has worked as a small business entrepreneur in Russia for the CIA's Open Source Center Eurasia desk. He invented Redact, the world's first global R&D database and search engine to assist companies in identifying which intellectual property is of value to foreign governments. He's the founder and organizer of Suits and Spooks. That's a conference for a discussion of challenges in the national security space. And he's the author of the book, Inside Cyber Warfare, Mapping the Cyber Underworld. We recorded this on March 24th, 2022. Jeffrey Carr is here. It's great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on the show, Jeff. How you doing?
Good. Staying busy. Thank you.
Haven't been getting a lot of sleep lately from what I read in your latest article. So the last time we talked, you were considering sort of bowing out of this field. So when I heard from you about this article, I was like, wow, he's back in the game. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, about, in general, what's going on with you and with the field itself. I also heard that there's like hundreds of thousands of job openings for cybersecurity people. Amazing.
Yeah. And so I was really burned out, I guess, in 2016. Feeling like I was, fighting a losing battle regarding attribution and the need to have some ground truth to support claims of attribution rather than just a theoretical basis and some technical indicators. And the entire industry is built around that. So I just got tired of beating my head against a wall and I eventually realized nothing would change. So I decided to move into a different area and work on data privacy and the commercialization of our data as it's being done and has been done for so many years by Google and everybody else, Facebook and so on. But then early this year, I was contacted by a section of the Ukrainian government which handles offensive cyber, and the developer, two of their operators were also software developers. And they had a really interesting open source platform, and they were looking for some introductions to the agencies here, FBI or any of the law enforcement agencies that operate in the United States, because they felt like it had the ability to be helpful to identify bad actors that are operating on social media. And of course, I thought, that's great. I was already heavily involved in investigating social media, and of course, I've done open source intelligence work since 2006 or 7, and so that's how I sort of started this relationship. After they had reached out, we just stayed. I was continuing to work on their behalf, and they started, expressing concern about what was happening on the borders, on their borders, and whether or not there would be a war or whether or not Russia would invade. And as you may have read, in the article, nobody really knew until it happened.
Right.
And then when it did happen, I was, I had already by now become friendly. I felt like a bond with what these guys were dealing with, and because the amount of pressure was crazy.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
They all have families. They were trying to get their families out of the country, or at least out as far west as they could get. And so then I saw that I stepped away from my phone for like, I think it was an hour, maybe 90 minutes. And when I came back, I saw that he had tried to call me. And then he said something like, it started.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at it now. It started. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I called him back. And I think we were only on the phone for maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes before he disconnected. And then I couldn't raise him again for the next 10 hours. And ever since then, I've changed my sleeping habits so that I could be more or less on their time. And I sleep with my phone just to make sure that if he does call me, I can answer. Or if somebody calls me because he's there, they've shared my contact info with their team just in case somebody is killed. It can, we can continue this operation. And that has been it's been so energizing and so anxiety filled, right, at the same time. But they've had so many successes that I'm just feel honored that they gave me this level of trust, to help in some small way.
So basically you were working on a different project, and then when the war happened, they found you to be useful in other ways. Is that kind of how it evolved?
Yeah. Well, originally they reached out to me because back in 2015, I had when I still had my startup, we had been able to uncover a Russian technology transfer operation that was trying to get thermal imaging technology up, which is restricted. You're not allowed to sell that to Russia from the U.S. So they were Russia was trying to do a workaround to get that technology to help in their war against Ukraine. That was the war that they started back in 2014. And unbeknownst to me, the Ukrainian government had a copy of that report that we created. And so I think that was when, I started to sort of engender some trust and get their attention. And these guys knew about it. They mentioned it when they contacted me. And then it just sort of grew from there. So
that's why the last time we talked, we were talking about this claim that I don't want to get too much into that story, but it involved an app that was locating artillery pieces or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And that was Ukraine, right? So that was like the story about how the leaker hack story.
Probably the worst example of for-profit. It's probably the worst example of what happens when you have for-profit
attribution
cybersecurity companies doing attribution and quote unquote intelligence work.
Attribution
that was
for
almost
sale.
An entirely invented story.
Yeah. So so this Ukraine keeps like popping up in your life.
It does,
way or
right?
Another.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I had to. I'm getting older, so I have arthritis, and really a bad arthritis in one of my knees. So I had to start walking with a cane. So I went online and I found a cane that I liked and placed the order for it. I didn't realize where it was coming from or who made it, but it turned out to be a Ukrainian blacksmith that works with converting these iron railroad spikes into art, you know. And so
Amazing.
again, it was so interesting. Another Ukrainian connection.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So back to the story. So you said, you didn't hear from them for 12 hours or for 10 hours. And when they got back to you, then they were already set up again in a bunker, you say? And so they reset up their operation, I guess, or had to move.
Yeah, they had to move, right? And they've
Yeah.
been moving ever since. They've had to stay mobile ever since. In fact, just recently, I was on signal with one of the operators, and all of a sudden, he said something to the effect of he said there's three big explosions, very, very close, and he needed to end the call right away to see what's going on or to take cover. And the next day, he sent me a video of the scene, and it was just utter devastation. It turned out to be it was a commercial area where they were operating out of. Somebody had seen some Ukrainian army vehicles nearby, because these guys, even though these guys aren't soldiers, so to speak, I mean, they're soldiers, but they do cyber operations, and they have special forces that accompany them to set a perimeter, and somebody had seen some trucks, and that person either took a picture or took a video and he posted it on TikTok. And it was shortly after that either artillery or missiles started coming into that vicinity. And that really just goes to show how important it is not to, if you're in the middle of anything that is of interest to nation states, not to be posting about it on social media unless you want attention.
Yeah.
And now this person, they discovered who this person is, and so now there's a manhunt out for him.
So the organization is GURMO, GURMO, and it's
right.
It says main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Ukraine. Is that their intelligence organization, or
that's their version of the Defense Intelligence Agency here?
Like a DIA. Okay.
Yeah.
So they are military targets then. They're going to be, because as one of Russia's stated goals is to demilitarize, and they seem to be going after every military base and operation that they can. So I would imagine these guys are, well, particularly if they're offensive and they're hacking Russia, then they're clearly going to be a target, right?
Oh yeah, and they've already received calls threatening their families from these Chechen guerrillas that are operating in Ukraine on behalf of Putin, and so their names and faces and there are on playing cards for assassination. So, and
they really have those
one of the problems.
Cards?
Yeah.
I thought
I'm calling them playing cards. They're cards, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, in the Iraq War, they literally did playing cards, right? So, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think these may be, these may be the same, they may be different, but
some kind of similar thing.
There's something that's conveying targets, right? Who the targets are.
Yeah. You know what I meant
to ask?
And
for that reason, they don't speak with the press. I mean, apart from the fact that they're fighting a war and can't take time
A little
out,
busy for that.
for an interview, they also don't want their names, faces, or voices recorded. So,
and I guess you had to run this article past them before you published it, right? Just to make sure they were cool with it, telling this story.
no, they trusted me to write
Mhm.
it the way that I've
Because they actually want some publicity, right? I mean, they want people to be aware of the work they're doing.
That's the whole point. The whole point was to send a message and create a morale crisis on the part of Russia, Russian soldiers, the Russian government, let them know that their networks are not safe from Ukraine's cyber teams, and that if they cross a line, then Ukraine has the ability to reach out and touch them also.
Just an aside, the flickering light that you may see, there's a hanging light above me, and it has multiple lights, and one of them was flickering. Now it just went out. I don't know if it's going to come back. So it's not like doomsday or here. It's just a light bulb burning out. Yeah. Anyway, it's always something. I meant to ask you. You said that since these were sensitive conversations, you use Signal. I use Signal every day too, but I've always figured that Signal was not secure, or at least
it's end-to-end encrypted. Signal is part of Whisper Systems. They've been really at the forefront of doing complete encryption. So they themselves cannot see what's being transmitted, which is different from what many companies do, which is they'll encrypt it partially, but they'll still be able to scan the contents internally. So there's a few companies that, especially like Proton Mail, if you're using email, they do end-to-end encryption also. They have no idea what's in your messages. So if they receive a warrant or something to turn over files, they have literally nothing to turn over. And Signal is that way.
Okay, that's good, because I use actually both of those. I don't use Proton Mail that much, but I do have one, and I have some people who are urging me to switch everything to that. It's just a matter of how changing emails is a real pain in the neck.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's good. That's good to know. Now, so the war is ongoing now, and does their mission change, or were they always sort of they're an offensive cyber team, so their job is to disrupt, to hack, get documents, things like that. I'm not even sure what a cyber offensive team does.
Their job is to get inside networks and maintain a presence in the network for countries that they're see as a legitimate espionage target.
And so they year round they work to get into the network and sit there. And then I would say that if they are inside the Russian network, then it suddenly became much more, I mean, not that they weren't at odds already, but it suddenly became a lot more important. The fact that they were there, and I guess whatever information they could get. Like, I was surprised at some of the things you said they got an operations plan for the Russian attack on Ukraine. Well, they might be the only person in the world who knows, because nobody can seem to figure out what Russia's ultimate goal and plan is. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, that was actually not them. That was I think a newspaper. I think it was a Ukrainian.
ZN.ua.
An official Ukrainian newspaper.
I misread that.
That somebody, somebody
he sent you a link. He sent you a link to
Yeah.
obtained by sources of Ukrainian news website cn.ua. I got
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Plenty of Russians are supportive of Ukraine, so it's not at all surprising that
I see.
Russia would have leaks
So
like
it would
that.
be leaked. I get it. So what are some of the interesting things that have been going on? You talk about, well, I should let you tell the story of how it played out. Why don't I turn it right back over to you? The other information you've got in the article.
So they're, as you said, their objective, especially now, is to acquire a presence in inside of Russia's most important or most valuable networks, and because they're concerned about sabotage against Ukraine, they want to be in a position to return fire, so to speak, should that happen. What they do not want to do is do anything that is escalatory. So espionage, which is what they have been doing, is a legitimate process both in war and in peace, and it's not escalatory. And Russia does it. We all do it. Every country does it all the time. So, that is so far is what they have been doing. However, they're quite capable of sabotaging a network, of taking down a network, of creating mayhem, and making and tying up Russian resources. So they're prepared to do that should Russia escalate. If Russia escalates to some type of if they're successful in some type of devastating cyber attack that crushes Ukraine's
Can I just ask a
power or
quick question?
communications.
When you
Yeah.
say escalate, you mean escalate. I mean, Russia's invading, they're rolling tanks in Ukraine. When you say escalate, though, you mean on the cyber aspect of this war, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Either cyber or chemical or biological or nuclear, all escalatory, right?
Gotcha.
If they, I'm not privy to their strategy of conducting this war at all. They share some information with me, and along with some of their targets. Some of the targets I'm not allowed to disclose, and others I can.
Of course, yeah.
But I can just say that it's an excellent tier 1 unit, and they seem to be able to operate at will. That Russia has not been successful in stopping them, or in protecting, or in defending its networks, including the Belyarsk nuclear power plant, the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, which is a massive international organization of nuclear researchers among 18 countries, mostly Eastern European. So the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, which is a very, very large organization. It has 18 members, mostly Eastern European countries. They just opened a few years ago a very specialized particle accelerator called a cyclotron. I think it might be the first one in the world of that size, and so Russia's really finest achievements are not immune from having their networks compromised and having their intellectual property taken. And I don't know if you caught this, but they also breached there's the Russian space program and the new launch complex that they're building, and also the VTB Bank, Russia's second largest bank. And all of the data that they've taken from that bank has gone to an office, a different office in the Ukrainian government that is doing an asset hunt for the Russian oligarchs that are under sanctions so that they can, acquire those assets and use it to help rebuild Ukraine. But basically, in the process of breaking into VTB Bank's network, they were able to find a way to get into other banks. So, which is how it works sometimes with
through their connectivity. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you're in, and that organization is connected to another organization, and it's sort of a supply chain concept. So they're pretty unstoppable, and unless unless Russia gets lucky and finds a way to do that. But so far,
that is kind of surprising. That, I mean, I guess everybody's vulnerable, right? Because people are discovering new exploits and all kinds of things every day. I was in the software business for a long time, and it's very vulnerable. It's very flawed. The more complex, the more flawed. There are 100 reasons why I'm not confident. I think cybersecurity people are going to be in business for a long time, and why I don't have that much faith in the so-called God of AI either. But I was just talking to Kyle Anselin last night. We were talking about the financial aspect of it, and how we thought that Russia would withstand the sanctions a little bit more easily than they did, although I don't think anybody expected the central bank part of it. But they planned and timed this operation, this invasion. They had full control over the timing of it. So we were a little surprised that they didn't sort of like just handle it more easily. Although surprisingly, they are handling it pretty well considering what's coming at them. So at the same, I would feel the same way about the cyber attacks. They have to know that there were going to be cyber attacks coming at them, when they started rolling tanks into another country. So were you surprised at how vulnerable they were? Because again, I worked in the IT business for a long time. There are a lot of really good Russian IT people, and for a long time, there's been a whole sector of people who emigrate here, and it's just something that I guess is prominent in that country, and that's why there are so many good programmers. So I kind of expected them to be kind of one of the best.
They are. I think Russia has excellent skills and outstanding universities. A lot of people do their coding with, they outsource their coding to Russian software developers because they're so good. It's not that they're not good. It's that there are so many ways to get in. You can't really defend your network, honestly. There's just too many other ways to get in. And that's the ugly truth about the whole cybersecurity industry, is that the marketing is basically build the enemy up as big as possible. And so I think we're suffering from an overblown, inflated super villain that we've turned Russia into over the years in order to help us sell more cybersecurity toys, and also a overstated reliance or overstated capabilities of what those cybersecurity tools can do, and that's all marketing. That's all marketing fluff. Both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
So the reality, what we're seeing right now is the reality. The cybersecurity tools are not going to keep out a savvy adversary, and as Ukraine is demonstrating, And also, Russia is not a cyber, supervillain. As we can see, there's been literally nothing except Viasat is the only success story so far of a major having major impact, of a cyber attack having major impact. That's not to say that Russia is not trying, but they're not being, because the department that handles cyber defense is different from the team that I'm talking to. And so I hear, from time to time that they're extremely busy and they're doing their best to stay one step ahead. But clearly, we are now looking at a fabrication of a villain and that villain's capabilities. When in reality, Russia is just like everybody else. They can't keep everybody out, and they are struggling with manpower shortages, and to make matters worse, a lot of Russians don't even want to be involved in this war. So,
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, some people seem to be very gung ho. The polls seem that to say that the country has rallied behind Putin, and yet, and this is only a few anecdotal people, but people who have friends, in Russia, or even, if they live here now and came from Russia, they're, pretty distressed about it. They're pretty upset about it. They're not in favor of what they see happening. So I guess, as with every country, they're going to be different sentiments. But that's interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Viasat situation? It's kind of interesting.
Well, I only know what I have in that article that I wrote, but it seems the Viasat went down at the exact moment that the invasion started.
Yeah.
So that pretty much rules out coincidence, in my opinion.
So when you say it bricked the satellite modems, was that a temporary thing, or did it make them just unusable?
No, they were unusable.
Wow.
So they had to actually replace them. They couldn't be rebooted. There was no fix.
And they did that with software?
It was a firmware. It was a firmware update.
Kind of like what my son did to his PSP many years ago, right?
Probably, yes.
Yeah. Let me see. I've got other questions here. And then I have some broader questions for you too. A couple of news items. When we talked about how the original plan was to seize the leadership in Ukraine. Was that from that article? I forget which part of the hack that was from.
Pretty sure that all came from that article.
Okay.
That whole section about Russia's operations plan came from.
So we don't know exactly what they meant by that. Did they mean to take them and haul them out of there? Or, in other words, this whole thing was a regime change operation, or I was just curious if you knew anything more about that detail.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Whatever is on the page there is.
Yeah. Okay. So I looked up, I've heard lots of things about sort of grave warnings about cyber attacks from Russia, and but I'm not hearing any real specifics until just in the past couple days, and even then it's still pretty broad. They're talking about, well, let me find it for you. So on Monday, Biden issued some kind of a warning. President Biden called for companies to raise their cyber defenses this week at the risk of an attack from Russian hackers increases. Of highest concern is critical infrastructure like communications technology and electricity. But in the digital age, pretty much every industry company has some sort of vulnerability to cyber attacks, even if they may not know it. And then they say, again, more about the White House putting out this warning. And then CBS put out an article, I think today, said the FBI warned that the US energy sector warned them about network scanning activity stemming from multiple Russia-based IP addresses, activities believed to be associated with cyber actors who, quote, previously conducted destructive cyber activity against foreign critical infrastructure. The FBI bulletin issued on March 18th, obtained by CBS News, was released just days before President Biden, so not today, days before Biden announced on Monday that evolving intelligence suggests that Russia is exploring options for potential cyber attacks targeting the US homeland. And then it says, but some US security firms have alleged found alleged discrepancies in the FBI memo, saying many of the IP addresses listed don't exhibit targeted behavior, while others are not even geolocated in Russia. So they called it out, like, I don't know about this. They said since February 15th, the Ukrainian government said it suffered over 3,000 DDoS attacks on the barrage government websites, with traffic rendering them unusable. But cyber attacks launched by Russia since the start of the Ukrainian invasion have created relatively minimal damage compared to the shelling of cities, civilian casualties brought on by the kinetic warfare. So there are all these warnings out there, and yet they're pretty, they're still kind of vague. And frankly, when those cybersecurity experts came in and said, scanning networks, they disputed whether those IP addresses were really guilty of previous, whether they were a suspect or had done previous attacks before. And I don't know, after all that stuff with the Russia hack, I've lost a lot of faith in anything that the government puts out in terms of warnings. I don't know whether they have another agenda, whether somebody's trying to get some money. There's some kind of regulation involved here that they want to, I don't know if they have another agenda. So I was just wondering, your thoughts on that, because we've talked about this before a lot.
I think that it's appropriate to question these things. It doesn't hurt to take precautions. You should try to make sure everything is patched, and when these, there's nothing wrong with saying that, hey, there may be an increase in cyber attacks against the US. Okay. I'm not sure that, it's sort of like there might be a terrorist attack in your city. Well, what are you supposed to do about that? This is marginally better because, maybe if you're a little bit behind on your cyber hygiene, then you can do something, right? But you can't, if it's going to take down the power grid, I suppose maybe you can stock up on batteries or candles. I don't know. It just seems like it's so, what's the point? Because what's your population going to do? Probably nothing. And maybe, except it'll elevate the fear.
Well, and that could be the goal.
And maybe that's the point. Right? Which would suck if that was the case, but
yeah.
And then and my problem from being in this field for so long and attempting to question the standards of attribution that are used and the reliance on the private sector is that I'm fairly confident that that all of these reports are probably being informed by data that has never been verified as correct. And that's my, that's always been my biggest complaint about how we conduct our cyber intelligence. So, and that hasn't changed. So, I think practically speaking, all of Russia's resources are tied up in Ukraine. I would be very, very surprised if we had any kind of significant cyber attack. And if we did, my first guess is that it would be another country that made it look like it was Russia.
Well,
Because
I mean,
that would be that's where it's going. That's where the blame is going to go. It's like a perfect opportunity for any other nation to launch a cyber attack against the US, use some Russian malware, and it's immediately going to be blamed on Russia.
I don't even think it has to be another nation, just another entity.
And yeah, you're exactly right. It could be anybody. It does not have to be a nation state.
Yeah. And I mean, there are clearly, when you watch the news and what's going on, there are clearly factions that want this to escalate to World War level, and there are others who don't. So, that's pretty scary. It's just, there's just so many different ways that things could really get worse than they already are. There was one more thing, another article that this may or may not even be relevant, but it just turned out that I think this one was from today. Yeah, from today. It says a Ukrainian CEO turned hacker details the official cyber war between Russia and Ukraine. They're talking about Dima Budarin, a Ukrainian web security entrepreneur turned cyber warrior. Currently, he's based in Spain after leaving Kyiv just days before the Russian invasion began. And this person says it's an official cyber war between Russia and Ukraine. Co-founder, CEO of Hacken, a Ukrainian cybersecurity consulting firm, told Yahoo Finance. And he just said that he's got a 70-member team. Anyway, he just talks about how it's all out war between Russia and Ukraine. So they're not just, fighting on the battlefield. They're doing a lot in cyberspace as well. So your colleagues or clients are looks like they have their work cut out for them.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, duh, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that we want to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, honestly, I have to figure out how to get my Substack back up, since somebody.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I don't want to say that that it's Russia, but maybe it's just a coincidence that it happened right after I
published this.
Was doing an interview with a news outlet.
So is it just your Substack or other people's?
No, it's just mine. It appears to be just mine.
Wow.
Substack is reporting normal activity, but I don't know. I can't reach anybody there, so who knows?
Yeah. Well, tell us anyway how to get to that Substack and where to find your work. And you said you just did an NBC interview, right? Or that's going to be out soon. So maybe I'll be able to link that before this gets published tomorrow.
It'll be tomorrow. The interview will be tomorrow. It'll be broadcast tomorrow afternoon, or tomorrow at noon. I think it's around noontime. I'm not sure. I'll DM you once I know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and if there's a video,
and you can use the URL insidecyberwarfare.com. I'll point that to wherever I wind up next.
For your Substack. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't know this article. I read the one at O'Reilly. I didn't even know that they had a a section for a blog and things like that. That's pretty
O'Reilly
neat.
Radar, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So I was glad to see that. I used to read you over at Medium. Are you still maintaining that, or did you switch over to Substack?
Um, I still have that Medium blog up. I've used it. I used it at the beginning, but I switched away from that over to Substack. And now I may just take it over to WP Engine because they have, a live person. They're
Yeah.
24/7 support. It's a live person. And because of the controversial nature of what I'm writing, I think that's probably where I need to be.
You would be safer. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting that, a specific Substack could be targeted. I don't know how they segment things off, but
Well, there's a URL, so if maybe it's just the DDoS.
okay, just that. Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not even sure if I'll find out, honestly, until they get back to me.
Right. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I just would like to say thank you, Joanne. I appreciate it. It's always nice to talk to you.
Same here. Always great to talk with you, Jeff. Good luck with what you're doing, and take good care. I'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty, great. You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Jeffrey Carr. Follow him on Twitter at Jeffrey Carr and at his Substack, Inside Cyber Warfare. Also find his book, Inside Cyber Warfare, on O'Reilly Media. This is a fully independent podcast. Your support's more important than ever. Go to the website aroundtheempire.com and you can find everything you need there on how to get access to bonus content, how to support the show, where to find the platforms, and so on. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave reviews. Those things all help. Follow on Twitter at Around the Empire, on Telegram, t.me/Around the Empire, and we'll see you next time. Take good care, everybody. Hang in there. Stay strong.